Posting process, I start with the Virginia data in a very simple format, and the first thing we have to do is we have to transform it into simple structures because there are different delimiters in some of the files, different columns in some of the files, so we have to get those straightened out so that it's consistent throughout the time period. I chose to use the program awk as a simple way of transforming the files. After we've transformed the files, then I also split the files into 10 parallel threads. I just use the first digit, the first letter of the vendor name to split the files into 10 different partitions. So now the process is running in parallel thread, one against each one of those partitions of the data. The next step of the process is to sort the file first by vendor name so that I get all of the records for a similar vendor right next to each other before I go into the next phase of the process. After I get those vendor names next to each other, I go into the ID assignment program. This program is written in Scala, and it reads both the transaction file that's now sorted by vendor name and a master file that is where we keep the vendor names and the associated vendor ID next to them. So this process then takes each transaction and assigns a vendor ID to them. If they don't have if that vendor is a brand new vendor, then it will assign a brand new ID to that vendor and store that in the ID master file as well. And then it writes out the transactions with that ID assigned on them, plus also all of the, it turns them into universal journals. Has a bunch of additional attributes that I know. For example, the state of Virginia, all U.S. transactions, U.S. dollar transactions. From the file names, I can tell certain dates that I can add, which isn't an attribute on the record. There are certain things that I can default, and I can assign IDs to these as well. So that's going on now in the first program. Also, when I detect that I have a brand new vendor, I write out a vendor transaction record so that as I get into the second phase of the program, program number 2, stage 2, I can then update the actual vendor master file. In stage 2 of the program, as I read the files, I then take those transactions, those universal journals, and I post them to balances. I update the vendor master file as well with any new vendors that have come along. So through the course of the process, I turn about 80 million, 80 to 100 million transactions into 12 million balances. So that process of turning transactions into balances gets rid of a lot of volume, but keeps a lot of the attribution that I need. You can see the performance of this. This runs parallel, so I've got 10 threads going on, so the machine is running fairly quickly through doing this process. And at the end of it, we have done 1 quarter worth of processing in about a little over 3 minutes of time. So a quarter worth of data, a few 10 million records or so into 1 quarter's worth of balances.